We attach importance to the protection of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, including the Crimea, whose annexation we do not recognize. Within China's territorial integrity perspective, we do believe that more efforts need to be displayed regarding the protection of the basic rights of the Muslim Uyghur Turks. We maintain our stance in favor of solving the ongoing problem in Kashmir for 74 years through dialogue between the parties and within the framework of relevant United Nations resolutions. We also support ensuring the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of Rohingya Muslims who are living under difficult circumstances in camps in Bangladesh and Myanmar back to their homelands. A fair, lasting, and a sustainable solution to the Cyprus question is possible only through a results-oriented, realistic approach. While the leader of one of the two peoples on the island, which the United Nations considers as equal, can address you, it's not fair that the other leader cannot make his voice heard on this platform. For a solution, it is necessary to reaffirm the sovereign equality and equal international status of the Turkish Cypriot people, who are the co-owners of the island. Therefore, we support the new vision put forward by the Turkish Cypriots for a solution. I hereby call on the international community to address the views of the Turkish Cypriots with an open mind and without any prejudice. The continuation of the calm environment in Eastern Mediterranean region is in our common interest. We hope that the problems regarding maritime boundary delimitation will be resolved within the framework of international law and good neighborly relations. For this, it is necessary, first of all, to abandon the mentality whereby Turkey, which has the longest coast in the Eastern Mediterranean, is completely disregarded in the region. Our proposal to organize an Eastern Mediterranean conference in which all the actors in the region will be represented for dialogue and cooperation still remains on the table. Similarly, we believe that the problem in the Aegean Sea should be resolved through a bilateral dialogue. We also maintain our determination in the European Union membership process. We are in full solidarity with the continent and the African Union also today, drawing on the strength of our deep-rooted ties with Africa, which dates back 2 centuries. With this understanding, we continue our efforts to hold the 3rd Turkey-Africa Partnership Summit in Turkey in the forthcoming periods. With our Asia Anew initiative, we are consolidating Turkey's unifying position between Europe and Asia. Likewise, we attach great significance to developing our relations with Latin America and the Caribbean region on bilateral and multilateral platforms. Turkey has been and will continue to be by the side of every step taken forward for a safer, peaceful, prosperous, and equitable world for everyone. Distinguished delegates, while the Earth embraces millions of living species on its soil, it only expects us to respect the balance of nature in return for this generosity. Unfortunately, mankind has recklessly used the resources the Earth offered us in search of progress and development, which we pursued throughout history. At the end of this process that lasted for centuries, we are now facing threats entirely caused by men, outside nature's own balance. The problems, which we may classify under topics such as climate change, air pollution, water and food security, loss of biodiversity, have reached to such an extent that will steer us from a safe and a prosperous future for the entire human race. Among these topics, climate change is one we should particularly focus on, as beyond being an environmental problem, it will lead to irreparable consequences and uncertainty. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide which have increased by 50% compared to the pre-industrial period, literally elevate the world's temperature. Indeed, for some time now, disasters have been occurring all around the world caused by an increase of 1.1 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial period. We are experiencing unusual events such as floods in Asia and Europe, hurricanes in America, drought in Africa, fires in the Mediterranean basin, rainfall on the peak of Greenland, and snowfall on the deserts. These disasters not only cause damage to the environment and the ecosystem, but also threaten people's livelihoods and property. In many places, people are collectively preparing to go to other places, to migrate. However, the world hasn't still found a solution to the refugee problem caused by conflict-prone crisis regions such as Syria and Afghanistan. At this time, we don't know how to deal with the migration of hundreds of millions of people due to factors such as drought, food shortages, and meteorological events. The greatest impact of climate change will be observed on the populations living in the centers of metropolitans. For example, the city of New York, where we are right now, has gone through very challenging days as it has suffered from giant hurricanes within only a 2-week time span, which in turn caused rainfalls witnessed only once every 500 years. The destruction caused by rains affecting the Western Europe has yet to be repaired. Although we, as Turkey, produce the most rapid and effective solutions in that regard, we've experienced our share of quite challenging days. A significant part of the world infrastructure is a byproduct of the last 2 centuries of human progress. So it is not possible to handle the ramifications of climate change with the existing infrastructure. The continued rise in global temperatures, hence expectations for more intense rainfalls, must steer all of us towards new pursuits. For example, it has now become mandatory for urban planning to be taken into consideration by respecting the consequences of climate change. Another danger awaiting our world is that forests, being among the most important carbon sinks, are now facing complete annihilation due to land use on the one hand and fires on the other. Another area affected by the increase in temperature is our seas. Expanding water and melting glaciers have raised sea levels by 20 centimeters over the past century. This figure is the fastest increase during the last 3,000 years. If effective measures will not be taken and greenhouse gas emissions will continue to increase, sea levels are expected to rise by more than 1 meter at the end of this century. Such a rise would mean that an important part of coastal cities and island states will be wiped out completely. Of course, this situation will also be accompanied by new and massive waves of migration. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that all these problems have come up only with a 1.1 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. I leave it to you to consider what would happen if the temperature increase would reach 1.5 Celsius or 2 Celsius, or even more. Distinguished delegates, hence, after all these developments, as the states of the world, we came together in 2015 to fight climate change, and we've agreed on the Paris Climate Agreement. The scope of the agreement is to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the midst of the century. However, the current trend shows that this is not quite possible if measures will not be taken duly. For this reason, first and foremost, it's compulsory for countries with historical accountability for the emergence of problems which led to climate change to take the main responsibility. It may be possible to prevent the coronavirus pandemic with the vaccines which were developed. However, it's out of the question to find such a laboratory-manufactured solution to climate change. For this reason, also for climate change, we repeat our appeal with the motto that we continuously repeat: the world is bigger than 5. Whoever has done the most damage to nature, to our atmosphere, our water, our soil, and the earth, and whoever has wildly exploited natural resources should also make the greatest contribution to the fight against climate change. Unlike the past, this time, no one can afford the luxury to say, "I'm powerful, so I will not pay the bill." Because climate change will treat mankind quite equally. It will treat everyone exactly the same, regardless of the differences between the European or the Asian, American or the African, rich or the poor. The duty for all of us is to take measures against this enormous threat with a fair burden sharing and to fulfill our obligations duly and immediately. As Turkey, we act with this mentality. We are among the first countries to have signed the Paris Climate Agreement. However, we hadn't yet ratified this agreement due to the injustices related to stated obligations and burden sharing. I would like to announce to the whole world, here from the United Nations General Assembly, the decision we have taken following the progress made within the framework of the agreement recently. We plan to present the Paris Climate Agreement for approval to our Parliament next month, within the framework of our National Determination Contribution Statement and in conformity with the positive steps which will be taken. Before the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which will be held in Glasgow, we envisage to complete the ratification phase of the Carbon Neutral Targeted Agreement. We consider this process, which will lead to radical changes in our investment, manufacturing, and employment policies, as one of the main elements of our 2053 vision. Of course, we have other measures with respect to climate change. We prepared the action plan necessary for harmonization with European Union's Green Deal and put it into effect in the past month. With the Zero Waste project led by First Lady, my wife, Her Excellency Emine Erdogan, we increased our recycling rate by 9 points in 3 years. We increased our sink areas by increasing our forest assets from 20.8 million hectares to approximately 23 million hectares. We increased the share of renewable energy resources in our electricity generation capacity to 53%. We have been promoting the steps that will restructure our industry in accordance with cleaner production activities for a better future. We are determined to bring these efforts forward by receiving the necessary financial support. Turkey is not indifferent to any global problem whatsoever, crisis or call, and will do its part on climate change and environmental protection similarly. So, ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude my remark, I would like to emphasize once again that our belief a fairer world is possible despite the difficulties we face. In this vein, we continue to view the United Nations as the unique platform for solving issues that concern the entire human race. Our new Turkish house building, located right in front of this building, which we have officially inaugurated only yesterday, is a testimony of our trust and confidence in the United Nations system. As a country with one of the 5 largest diplomatic networks in the world, we have a strong presence in the field and at the table for conscientious and fair solutions in a very wide geography. We can build a world of peace, stability, prosperity, and happiness all together. I once again would like to greet you all on behalf of my nation and wish the 76th General Assembly utmost success. May you all remain in good health.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Turkey for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Azerbaijan to introduce an address by the head of state.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce the pre-recorded statement by His Excellency Mr. İlham Heydaroğlu Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, for the general debate of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished heads of state and government. I congratulate Mr. Abdullah Shahid on his election as the President of 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly and wish him every success in fulfilling his duties. I also express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to Mr. Volkan Bozkır from Brasilia, Turkey, for his leadership as the President of the 75th session of the General Assembly. The COVID-19 pandemic continues posing serious challenges for the whole world. From the very beginning, our government has been taking robust and practical measures to protect the population and to minimize negative impact of the pandemic. Azerbaijan has launched immunization campaign since mid-January this year. Vaccine doses used per 100 people makes more than 80%. The socio-economic stimulus package, worth almost $2.7 billion, has been released to support COVID-affected people and business. As a result of well-planned measures, the situation with pandemic has been kept under control, and the quarantine regime has been gradually eased in our country. Azerbaijan's extensive efforts against the pandemic have been internationally recognized. In 2020, the World Health Organization hailed Azerbaijan as an exemplary country in fighting the pandemic. Azerbaijan carried out all these activities with its own financial resources. We have also made voluntary financial contributions to the World Health Organization in the amount of $10 million and provided financial and humanitarian assistance to more than 30 countries to support their fight against the coronavirus. Furthermore, we have provided more than 150,000 vaccine doses to 4 countries free of charge. Azerbaijan is advocating for a stronger global solidarity to overcome the pandemic. In this capacity, as a chair of non-aligned movement, Azerbaijan has put forward a number of global initiatives. In May 2020, Azerbaijan held summit-level meeting of the non-aligned movement's contact group in response to COVID-19. During the summit, I suggested, on behalf of the non-aligned movement, the convening of the special session of the United Nations General Assembly in response to coronavirus at the level of heads of state and government. This initiative was supported by more than 150 UN member states, and the special session took place on 3rd, 4th December 2020. I express my gratitude to the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and all states supporting our initiatives. On numerous occasions, Azerbaijan has publicly expressed its discontent with stockpiling of vaccines by some wealthy countries. We reiterate our dismay on the persistent vaccine nationalism and deepening inequality in access to vaccines between developing and developed countries. Such actions prevent developing countries from protecting their populations. According to international reports, so far, more than 75% of the world's vaccine doses have been purchased by 10 wealthy countries, while vaccine coverage of low-income countries is less than 2%. To call international attention to this challenge, Azerbaijan, on behalf of the non-aligned movement, initiated a resolution on ensuring equitable and universal access for all countries to vaccines in the UN Human Rights Council, which was unanimously adopted this March. Azerbaijan plans to initiate a resolution at the UN General Assembly on the same topic during this session. We believe that there is a need to take strong, cohesive and targeted global actions to recover better from COVID-19. In this regard, we suggest establishing a UN high-level panel on global recovery from the COVID-19, which could prepare recommendations on global measures for post-pandemic period. This year marks 60th anniversary of the establishment of the non-aligned movement. With a unanimous decision of 120 non-member states, Azerbaijan undertook the responsibility to chair the movement for 3 years at its 18th summit of the heads of state and government held in Baku in October 2019. Azerbaijan is strongly advocating for upholding international justice, norms of international law, and defending legitimate interests of member states of the movement. This year, the member states of the movement unanimously decided to extend Azerbaijan's chairmanship for 1 more year until late 2023. It is a sign of recognition and appreciation of Azerbaijan's successful and effective steering of the movement in this challenging time for the whole world. The implementation of Sustainable Development Goals is one of particular importance for Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is among 12 countries around the globe and is the first in our region that has submitted its third voluntary national review report on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Scoring 72.4 out of 100 points possible on the SDG Achievement Index, Azerbaijan ranks 55th out of 165 countries in the 2021 Sustainable Development Report, with the best result in the region. The report highlights Azerbaijan's progress in areas such as poverty reduction, healthcare, nutrition, women's labor force participation, clean water and sanitation, access to energy, internet usage, threatened species survival, as well as improving population welfare and sustainable development of cities and communities. Azerbaijan actively participates in building regional connectivity projects such as East-West, North-South, North-West transportation corridors, thus becoming one of Eurasia's primary and reliable transport and logistic hubs. We have put into operation the Baku International Trade Seaport with cargo handling capacity of 15 million tons per year, which can be increased up to 25 million tons per year depending on the needs. Azerbaijan ratified the Paris Climate Agreement with a voluntary commitment to achieve a 35% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to the base year 1990. Furthermore, we are exploring the possibilities for setting conditional targets for 2050 under the Paris Agreement. Currently, the share of renewables in the total energy capacity of our country is 17%. The target is to increase this number to 30% by 2030. Agreements have been signed with 3 major international energy companies to invest in the construction of 3 wind and solar power plants with total capacity of over 700 megawatts in the coming 3-4 years. One of these projects will be implemented in the eastern Zangezur region, liberated from Armenian occupation during the 44-day patriotic war. This 240 megawatt solar power plant will be so far the major foreign direct investment project in the liberated territories of Azerbaijan. I invite other international energy companies to come and invest in green energy in the liberated Azerbaijani territories. I announced the recently liberated Karabakh and eastern Zangezur as green energy zone. The liberated territories of Azerbaijan have the proven potential of 7,200 megawatts of solar energy and 2,000 megawatts of wind energy. Azerbaijan, along with crude oil and natural gas, recently became an exporter of electric energy. Today we export electric energy to 4 neighboring countries. Meantime, domestic electricity consumption is rising due to population growth and economic development. During 8 months of this year, non-oil industry of Azerbaijan grew 18.4%. Ladies and gentlemen, Azerbaijani people are strongly connected to its roots, history, language, and traditions. I have declared this year as a year of Nizami Ganjavi on the occasion of the 880th anniversary of the great Azerbaijani poet. In 12th century, Nizami Ganjavi propagated in his poetry the ideals and values such as peace, justice, humanism, freedom, and equality, which coincide with principles promoted and protected by the United Nations. In Azerbaijan, we cherish and support multiculturalism as a way of life. Azerbaijan is considered as an example of tolerance and peaceful coexistence of representatives of various religious and ethnic groups living in our country. The UN strongly supports Baku process, which was initiated by Azerbaijan in 2008 to strengthen dialogue and cooperation between the Muslim world and Europe. The UN General Assembly's resolutions have recognized the World Forum on Intercultural Dialogue held in Azerbaijan regularly as a key global platform for promoting intercultural dialogue. Ladies and gentlemen, last September, addressing the UN General Assembly, I draw your attention to continuing occupation of territories of Azerbaijan by Armenia and aggressive statements and actions of the Armenian government. Today, a year later, I proudly say that Armenia was defeated on the battlefield and Azerbaijan put an end to the occupation. Armenia for about 30 years kept under occupation almost 20% of the territory of our country. The occupation was accompanied by notorious war crimes and crimes against humanity. Armenia committed Khojaly genocide in February 1992, killing hundreds of civilians, including 106 women and 63 children. 1,275 Azerbaijanis were taken hostage, out of which 150 are still missing. Khojaly genocide has been recognized by 13 countries. Ethnic cleansing carried out by Armenia resulted in more than 1 million Azerbaijanis becoming refugees and internally displaced persons. The UN Security Council adopted 4 resolutions in 1993, demanding immediate, complete, and unconditional withdrawal of armed forces of Armenia from Azerbaijan's occupied territories. However, these and all other similar decisions adopted by relevant international organizations, including the UN General Assembly, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, Non-Aligned Movement, OSCE, Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and European Parliament, were ignored by Armenia. While some resolutions of the Security Council are implemented within days, in our case, they remained unfulfilled for 27 years, which is a clear manifestation of double standards. There is a need to join efforts to elaborate mechanism of implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions in order to avoid selective approach. The OSCE Minsk Group was established in 1992 with the aim to find resolution to the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. It could be possible for the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs to accomplish their task if they would take resolute actions for compelling Armenia to end its military aggression against Azerbaijan. Throughout the conflict, Armenia, with its attitude and actions, demonstrated that its sole aim was to maintain the status quo and consolidate the occupation. On many occasions, I raised the necessity of imposing sanctions on Armenia. Regretfully, there was no international sanctions imposed on Armenia to enforce the implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions. In 2018, the Kocharyan-Sarkisyan regime of war criminals was overthrown in Armenia. We had some hopes that the new government of Armenia would seriously engage in negotiations. We were ready to reciprocate any positive signal coming from Armenia. In 2018-2019, it was one of the most the calmest period in former line of contact. However, the regime replacement in Armenia was not followed by real changes on the ground, in spite of Azerbaijan's positive actions. The new government of Armenia also opted for the continuation of occupation instead of peaceful neighborhood with Azerbaijan. During the last 2 years of the conflict, Armenia deliberately destroyed the negotiation process. The government of Armenia made a number of provocative statements and actions, like saying Karabakh is Armenia, and period, and not an inch of occupied land back. The then Defense Minister of Armenia openly threatened Azerbaijan with new aggression and occupation of new territories. Armenia put forward unacceptable and groundless so-called 7 conditions and demanded to change the negotiation format, to start from the 0 point and to involve the puppet regime established by Armenia in the occupied territories in negotiation process. Attempts by Armenian government to change the format and substance of negotiations was an unpleasant surprise for the OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs, whose efforts were paralyzed by irresponsible and dangerous actions of Armenia. Furthermore, in gross violation of international law, including Geneva Conventions, Armenia was blatantly implementing the policy of illegal settlement of people, mainly from Middle East, with Armenian origin, in the occupied territories of Azerbaijan. Encouraged by the long-lasting sense of impunity, Armenia was also announcing construction of new roads from Armenia to occupied territories to further consolidate the result of its aggression and speed up the illegal settlement. In July 2020, Armenia perpetrated military provocation along the state border with Azerbaijan. As a result of the artillery strike inflicted on Azerbaijan's Toulouse district, 13 military servicemen and civilians were killed. Later in August last year, Armenia sabotage group attempted to penetrate through the formal line of contact to commit terror acts against Azerbaijani military servicemen and civilians, but it was successfully neutralized. In my statement at the general debate of the 75th session of the UN General Assembly on 24 September last year, I had warned that hostile, Azerbaijanophobic statements and provocations of Armenian leadership demonstrate that Armenia is preparing for a new aggression against Azerbaijan. 3 days later, on the 27th of September last year, Armenia launched a large-scale attack against military positions and civilians of Azerbaijan. In response, Azerbaijan, using its inherent right of self-defense as enshrined in the Article 51 of the UN Charter, started a counter-attack on its own territories against Armenia. During 44 days, armed forces of Armenia heavily shelled cities situated along the front line, namely Agdam, Algebedi, Beylagan, Tashkestan, Füzuli, Goranboy, Terter. Armenia also fired at Ganja, Barda, Mingechevir, Gabela, Siazan, Khızı, and other cities situated far away from the former front line. One of missiles was intercepted by Azerbaijani air defense forces in Khızı, close to Baku, which shows that the capital city Baku was also a target of Armenian missile attack. Armenia was using ballistic missiles like Skat and Iskander-M, as well as forbidden white phosphorus and cluster munitions. These war crimes of Armenia resulted in more than 100 civilians, including 11 children being killed, more than 450 wounded. More than 12,000 civilian infrastructures, including private houses in Azerbaijan, have been destroyed or severely damaged. Abiding by fundamental principle of international humanitarian law on the distinction between combatants and civilians, Azerbaijan never reciprocated Armenia's vicious war crimes by targeting civilians. Armenia also recruited mercenaries and foreign fighters from abroad and deployed them against Azerbaijan. During 44-day war, Azerbaijan liberated large part of occupied territories, including cities of Jabrail, Hadrut, Füzuli, Zengilan, Gubadli, and Shusha. In total, more than 300 cities and villages were liberated on the battlefield. Armenia had to sign an act of capitulation on 10 November 2020. Accordingly, Armenia was obliged to withdraw its troops from the remaining part of Azerbaijan's territories, namely Agdam, Lachin, and Kelbecer regions. Azerbaijan itself enforced the implementation of the above-mentioned UN Security Council resolutions. Probably it was the first case in the world since the establishment of the United Nations. Azerbaijan resolved the 30-year-long conflict and restored its territorial integrity and historical justice by military political means. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict was left in the past. There is no administrative territorial unit called Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan. We have created Karabakh and Eastern Zengezur economic zones by the presidential decree signed on 7th July this year. Using this occasion, I would like to call on all the UN member states and the UN Secretariat to avoid using legally non-existing, politically biased and manipulative names while referring to our territories. The building of multi-layered defense lines and fortifications with long trenches, tunnels and bunkers by Armenia for years in the formerly occupied territories of Azerbaijan proves that Armenia did not intend to return those territories by any means. During almost 30-year-long occupation, Armenia has deliberately destroyed cities and villages, looted and plundered all cultural and religious sites of Azerbaijan, turning them into the textbook example of urbicide and culturicide. After the Second World War, probably annihilation of cities in such a magnitude has not happened anywhere else in the world. 9 Azerbaijani cities and hundreds of villages have been barbarically wiped out by Armenia. Armenia attempted to erase the traces of Azerbaijani people living in these territories for centuries. Agdam city was destroyed to such an extent that it was called as Hiroshima of Caucasus. After the liberation, our army could not find a single building in Fizuli city to raise the Azerbaijani flag. Out of 67 mosques in the territories which were under Armenian occupation, 65 have been razed to the ground, and remaining 2 have been severely damaged and desecrated, including by being used as stables for pigs and cows, in total disrespect to all Muslims of the world. Even the graveyards were desecrated, destroyed, and looted. During visits to liberated territories, foreign diplomats, representatives of international organizations, and international journalists have witnessed the barbarism committed by Armenia. The facts of the full destruction of cities and villages, including the cultural and religious heritage sites of Azerbaijani people, has been widely documented and broadcasted by international media and independent experts. Each delegation in the United Nations has been provided with an illustrative book which contains brief information and photos of our towns and villages before and after the occupation. It reflects the total destruction of religious and historic monuments of Azerbaijan. Armenia has committed severe ecocide in the